Thank you for coming tonight to the Wasatch History Speaker Series. Every month we host a local or regional speaker about a specific topic regarding Wasatch County or the region. We're excited to host Michael O'Malley, who will talk about the Mayflower Mine tonight. Please put your hands together to welcome Michael.
Where we were staying was right near the Park City Library, and I would check out books once a year, learn about the history. We moved here in 1997, and okay, and how's, all right?
That's good.
Okay, good. Started volunteering at the Park City Museum, helping Hal Compton on his ski and hiking tours. Then got the best job in Utah. 2007 became a mountain host at Deer Valley and a hiking guide. And since that time, we have been doing a history hike series. I'll mention a little bit at the end about that. But what I'm going to do tonight is talk. First part of this talk is going to be kind of a general overview of the mining in the Wasatch Back. Then we're going to focus on the Keatley Tunnel, which which drained water out of the Ontario mine, one of the big mines. And then we're going to switch over and talk about the Mayflower Mine, which is right in the center of all those construction cranes. So jump in at any time with questions or corrections. I have a couple of coworkers in the audience, and they know that I never let the facts get in the way of a good story. So, history around here didn't start in 1847 or in the 1860s. We're on ancestral land of the Native Americans, and I kind of think they were our first, second homeowners, because they would tend to spend a lot of time down in the valley during the winter, because that was a more favorable climate and better biome. And then they'd come up here to the Heber Valley and Parley's Park to harvest and hunt in the summers. So, but mining started here in 1868 and went more than 100 years. The last mine to close was the Ontario in the early 80s. We were mostly silver and lead. I'm going to get into and share some opinions there. And tremendous amount of infrastructure underneath it. We're hiking and biking and skiing over Swiss cheese. It's just honeycombed with tunnels and shafts. And almost 300 of these mines were wet and cold. Water was a real problem in the Park City mines. You'd sink a shaft a couple hundred feet and the groundwater would start to impede your mining operations. You had to figure out either how to pump it out or build drain tunnels to drain it out. So, so most of the mines were dark, wet, about 50 degrees underground, maybe even colder. Perfect hypothermia conditions for your workers, except for one mine, and that was the Mayflower. That was a hot mine. That was hot, wet, and uncomfortable. So mining really got its kick from these two gentlemen. Brigham Young came out here in 1847. He was mostly interested in his adherents mining coal and iron. He wanted to create a sustainable economy. And with the exception of sending Sam Brannan out to California to bring a little gold back to help the economy, he was mostly telling his followers, don't go mining. I need you farming, I need you building stuff. And in 1862, Lincoln sent Patrick E. Connor out with 700 California volunteers. They built a fort at Fort Douglas, where the U of U is. And he had really three jobs. One was to keep an eye on the new telegraph line that had just been connected, in fact, coast to coast connected in downtown Salt Lake. So we were wired before the internet ever came along. And also to keep an eye on the mails and the wagon trains going to the West Coast, and also to keep an eye on the LDS, because Lincoln wasn't sure which way Utah was going to land in the Civil War. And Connor, on the other hand, really wanted to go back east and kill Confederates. And since none of them were around, the next best thing was the Northern Shoshone. So he was the guy behind the Bear River Massacre. Biggest massacre of Native Americans in U.S. history, and we don't hear about it because it was in the middle of the Civil War. Anyway, this was a strained relationship. The story is, I don't know how true it is, the story is that Connor had his cannon pointed at Brigham's house. Now, no way that he would have reached that house, but the point was being made. There was a strained relationship. Connor had seen, and a lot of his soldiers had seen what happened to California in 1849. And when you have an influx of people from all over the world, and Connor said, well, if I can have the same thing happen in Utah, then that will complicate Brigham's plans. And so he would send his soldiers out prospecting on the taxpayer dime to start a mineral strike and bring non-Mormons into the area. So really, and that's the reason Connor is called the father of Utah mining.
Are there things named after Connor?
No, he's not very popular. and I think for good reason. Brigham was a pretty stubborn and hard-nosed guy, but I think Connor was, pardon my language, he was a bastard.
Yeah.
So, anyway. Now, if you want to start a fight in the Park City historical circles, you talk about who made the first mining claim in the Park City area. And one camp of Flagstaffians, they say, oh, the soldiers that came out, actually it was 1868, they were actually over in Alta prospecting, and then they came up over into Bonanza Flat, saw some rock outcroppings out on what became Deer Valley's Flagstaff Peak, and they filed the Flagstaff claim. And they tied a red bandana around a bush or around a pole to mark that claim, and that's where Deer Valley gets its bandana run. That's one theory. The other theory is that Ephraim Hanks, who was LDS, made some early discoveries near the summit house of Park City Mountain, and that's probably more likely, not because there's any documentation, but because Ephraim probably didn't want any documentation. He didn't want to get on the bad side of Brigham. But Ephraim is worth a whole story, a whole lecture in himself. But so what we do know is that the Flagstaff was the first producing mine. It was the first mine to actually ship ore to a smelter in about 1870, I think, if I remember. And you can still see the waste rock pile if you can get into, have the gate code where all the hedge fund managers live. So Twain said it takes a gold mine to run a silver mine. And it really was a complicated ecosystem. You started with the prospectors. Think of them as independent contractors. They scoured every inch of the hills around here looking for visual evidence of galena. What's galena? A lead, silver, sulfur ore. You never saw pure silver. The prospectors never saw pure silver. I'll pass them around just in a second here. So the prospectors, most of them weren't interested in actually mining. Mining was hard work. They would look to sell their claim to a developer, someone like George Hearst. And those were the money men, because it took, as Twain said, it took a lot of capital to get things going. And then once you had the money in place and could hire workers, you had miners, engineers, timbermen. A lot of employees of these mines were actually carpenters. They were building wooden structures underground. The Park City Museum has a great exhibit that shows what those cubes of wood look like to keep the walls and the ceilings safe. And then lastly, you had, of course, the surrounding community with all the services that grew up around the mining operations. There's a picture of the Park City, the Miners Hospital. And this is actually part of my self-directed 401k, so I would like it back. I wouldn't advise licking it because it's got lead in it, but you'll see how heavy it is. Amy, will you make sure it's okay? So the miners, they came from all over the world. And boy, could they grow a mustache. And they came from Finland, Germany, the British Isles, particularly Cornwall. The Cornwall tin miners knew what they were doing in hard rock mining. And they were given 3 candles, which was enough light for a 10-hour shift. And they were given lunch, see those lunch pails? And they made $3 a day, which doesn't sound like much, but the average wage at that time in the 1870s was probably double the average wage. It was good money, especially if you're coming from overseas. And now the mining company took a little money back for room and board, but it was still decent money. If you worked on the railroad, you were probably making $1.50 a day. So again, good money. Then you got guys like George Hearst, who he had made some money in the silver camps of Nevada, and he heard good things are happening out here. He actually put a competing bid down on the Ontario claim, which had just been found in 1872, right by pretty close to Stein Erickson Lodge, and ended up paying $27,000 for it. That was probably $900,000 in today's dollars. Big money. And again, the story is, well, then he had to go around and get funding from his backers to actually start building the Ontario mine. And budget was so tight in Hearst's household, they had to take William Randolph out of private school. Actually, I think George also thought it was good to get William Randolph out of private school. But anyway, don't feel bad for the Hearsts, because the family made about $12 million out of the Ontario mine. And they took, that's in those dollars, before personal income tax. And so he did okay, and he parlayed that money up in the Dakotas, up in Deadwood, and made real bank up there. How am I doing, John? Okay? So far, so good? Okay. Yeah. So, anyway, so has anybody been to Hearst Castle on the California coast? Yeah. Part of the buildings and artwork were paid for by a hole in the ground in Park City. Oh, I don't have a picture of any prospectors. They were pretty elusive at an early stage. And so, since I'm not a professional historian, just think Yosemite Sam. Okay, what were they doing underground? Well, early days, single jacks and double jacks. Single jack is a chisel, one guy with a chisel and a 4-pound hammer making a hole for black powder or dynamite. Do about 10 of those on a wall, boom, and now you got rubble that has ore in it. The double jack is one guy holding the chisel and another guy swinging an 8-pound hammer. It's dark, it's cold, it's wet, you're probably hung over, especially the Irish. So, you know, what could go wrong? All right? And then, in the 1890s, they developed a pneumatic drill. The problem was, they didn't figure out in the first couple of years to put water hoses on it to keep the dust down. So the drillers were breathing in microscopic silica shards and lacerating their lung tissue. Terrible way to die. Terrible way to die. Finally, they figured out, okay, we better keep the dust down. But those were called widowmakers. You got paid more, but your life expectancy was a couple of years. So. Hard rock mining. Upside down Christmas tree is a very gentle analogy for a really hard line of work, so I'm not going to push it too far. But think about an upside down tree, the trunk, the main shaft, and wherever they encountered galena, they would send a tunnel, which they called a drift. They would send a drift following that vein. And if the vein enlarged, they would carve out something the size of this room, 1,000 feet underground. Those were called stopes. And they also had diagonal tunnels, 45 degree, called winzes. So those are 3 great Wordle words for you, right there. So you've got, I got this pointer here. So main shaft, tunnel, or drift, 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 drift. And then these shadowy areas are the stopes where they carved out. And what amazes me is there's a thing. Upside down Christmas trees are a thing. Anybody ever buy one?
No.
Apparently they're space saving. Yeah. But you know, I Googled upside down Christmas tree looking for an image, and it's like, oh, you want to buy one? Okay. Oh, jeez. Crazy. Crazy. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but the takeaway is the Park City Chamber of Commerce markets us as a silver town. Okay? Now, over 100 years, the average dollar that came out of the district was 41 cents silver, 38 cents lead, and the other 20 cents or so was copper, zinc, and gold. But in terms of tonnage, we were a lead camp. But it's harder to market lead. So, you know, so they went on a technicality. But anyway, picture a refrigerator's amount of ore-bearing rock. You know, they blasted it out, separated it. They're sending it to a mill to be crushed into a powder. They concentrate that powder into something that then can go to a smelter and be melted out into the different minerals, different ores. So picture a refrigerator, and after all that work, that's how much silver you have. Okay? That's about what 13 troy ounces of silver, which was the average take over 100 years, would amount to. Now, the lead would be about the size of a microwave out of that refrigerator. But this was worth more. So, and one of these little cubes was about how much gold they got out. But we're going to talk about that on the Mayflower. And I always like to take a step back and think about the Wasatch Back in terms of the economy of the day. And we were a Silicon Valley. We were a tech hub. We were the third town in Utah to get advanced technology like telephones and electricity. And this Ontario mill, if you're driving up Marsac, you're heading to Silver Lake, that stop sign, that's about where we're talking. This, when they built it in the 1890s, was state-of-the-art worldwide. And then you had aerial tramways to transport the ore or the concentrate down to the railroad depot. That's pretty sophisticated. And then the engineering they did to do those drain tunnels, also very sophisticated. So think of the amount of capital that the mines were bringing into this region. It's just phenomenal. And the only thing I can compare it to is, holy cow, there's 8 cranes right up there. There's a lot of money coming into town. So we still have this. We don't have that. Aerial tramways are now taking people up instead of more down. And drain tunnels are still part of our water infrastructure. Okay. This is a 1932 map of, let's see, right over here we're American Fork. And here we have Clayton Peak, which is Brighton. So pretty much the middle of the shooting match here. And right on the Wasatch line. This is Main Street, Park City. And this is our next slide, this rectangle. But just look at how many claims there were. Just over, probably in this image, probably, I'm guessing 2,000 claims. And from Clayton Peak on, our districts, Blue Ledge, Snake Creek, Park City, again, about 300 mines. And so here we're now in that blow up of the blue rectangle. And here is the bottom of the Jordanelle Gondola, over at Deer Valley. And we're going to talk about the Keatley Tunnel, which started about here over by Stein Erickson Lodge. And then this is the base of Deer Valley, where all the action is. And that's where the Mayflower Complex and the Mayflower Tunnel, which we're going to talk about, exit. So, gets you oriented. In terms of how north did all this action go, Iron Mountain on the canyons side of Vail was about as far north as there were any mining. Okay, why are we talking about the Pony Express? Well, Jack Keatley, born in the Midwest, scrawny little 19-year-old, gets hired by the Pony Express. And he had a couple of famous rides. Because one rider went sick, he had to go 31 hours, 341 miles, changing horses. And he was so tired at the end of that ride, the guys at the station had to take him off his saddle because he'd fallen asleep. Okay. But that was a darn good horse. Okay? And then another ride, about 300 miles, in under 24 hours, and he jumps off the horse and goes to a hoedown, which you can do when you're 19. So, but then he turned to mining. Became an engineer. He worked some mines in the Cottonwoods. He went up to Deadwood, North Dakota, worked up there. And then in '81, he comes down to build a drain tunnel, again, near that stop sign on the Marsac. You can see old structures on your left as you're driving up. That's where the drain tunnel exited from the number 3 shaft closer up to Steins, farther up Marzak. And that one was probably not quite a mile long, but he got his, he got experience there, and then they hired him in '88 to build the big drain tunnel at the 1,500-foot level out to basically where the gondola, the Jordanelle gondola is. It goes a little bit farther right to the shores of the Jordanelle right now. And we know this is R.C. Chambers, who ran the Ontario for George Hearst. We don't know who the other 3 guys. I don't know if any of them are skinny enough to be Jack. They hired those Pony Express riders to be small and white and wiry. But that might be a picture of Jack. The Keatley Drain Tunnel itself was a major, major engineering feat. You can see some of the stats there. I love that Mrs. Keatley at the ribbon cutting was the first person to walk in. That's true love. That's trusting your partner. And I don't think Jack was, I think he was persuasive, not abusive, because he took very good care of her throughout her life, especially in her old age when she started to decline in health. So I think it was true love, and she showed it. That average of $35 a foot, that would vary over the 3.5 miles of that tunnel. They ran into a chunk of what they call bad rock that they had to do a lot of carpentry to shore up. That probably slowed them down. Oh, it definitely slowed them down and increased expenses. But over the course of the entire project, that's your average. And it's now being operated and maintained by the Jordanelle Special Services District.
Question.
Yes, sir.
So back then, what did the water drain into?
The Provo. Would have come out the tunnel, and wherever the Provo was under Jordanelle, it would have gone in there. Any thoughts there? Good guess?
No dams.
Yeah, no dam. Yes, sir.
Back then, I think it would have met up with Ross Creek before.
Ross Creek, yeah.
Before joining into the program.
Yeah, if we reverse course and looked at that claim map, you might see some of the creeks. You could be right. And it was interesting, they would build these drain tunnels with multiple crews. So there was one crew starting near what's now the Jordanelle going in, and another would take the elevator down to the 1,500-foot level and go that way. Who rode the Silver Mine Adventure? Yeah. Do you remember seeing the pinprick of light? You could see the end of the tunnel 2 miles, 3 miles away. That engineering was phenomenal. They were doing it with plumb lines and lead weights and sextants and compasses. And when they met, they were just a few inches off, and the engineering was clean as a whistle. So Jack knew what he was doing.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can you see that from the Sky Ridge Trail by the Jordanelle?
You can actually see that when you're driving 40, or when you're up on top of the Sultan Lift at Deer Valley and looking down, you'll see right on the shores of the reservoir this big warehouse. And that's the Special Service District. You go inside there, it's got big concrete tubs of water, and they use that. They actually pour lime into it to precipitate out the zinc so that it's ready for culinary use. So that, you can see the water treatment plant. Yeah. So, but it's not much to look at. Yeah. So to wrap up Jack's story. Well, the drain tunnels were really good for taking water out, for transporting ore rather than spending money to take them up the elevator, and for miners to commute to work. And again, mines had a voracious appetite for wood. The hills all around us were denuded, which increased avalanche danger. So if the miners could commute in a drain tunnel, even though it was wet and cold, they loved it. But Jack went on to several decades in the district running some other mines. The Little Bell is over off the Bandana Run on Flagstaff. And I have to put in a shout out for the Friends of Ski Mountain Mining History. They are a committee of the Park City Museum. They have fundraised to preserve a lot of these structures. The Little Bell ore bin, which you ski by on the Bandana Run, would have been crushed into kindling two or three winters ago. But they fundraised, did the engineering, rebuilt, shored it up, and they're doing the same thing with the Silver King mine over by the Bonanza Lift. And they're working on the Thames shaft and all that. They're a good organization. And the drain tunnels today, Jordanelle Special Water District actually diverts some water back to Park City, and Park City has two drain tunnels of their own, the Judge and Spiro. 45% of Park City Municipal's water comes out of 100-year-old infrastructure. And I really recommend, if you have a chance to do a tour of the new water treatment plant over by the Park City Municipal Golf Course, Three Kings plant, the engineering going on in there is phenomenal. And it's really worth the time to visit that. Oh, one thing, you see this black cable. So I'm with a bunch of museum volunteers. About 15 years ago, we got a ride on the little tramway. We started at the Jordanelle and went into the 1,500-foot level, sort of doing the backwards of the silver mine adventure. But the guy would stop, the water district guy would stop and point things out along the way. And we're about a mile in, and we're 1,000 feet under rock. And I go, hey, buddy, my Verizon coverage sucks under here. What do you do if there's an emergency? How do you get a call out? And he said, not only can we get a call out, we can get 200 channels on cable TV. The cable company uses the Keatley Tunnel and the number 3 shaft to serve all the cable needs of the Silver Lake area. Okay, let's say goodbye to Jack, and we'll start focusing on the Mayflower Mine. Here is the new gondola up to Park Peak. Here is the Sultan Chair and the Mayflower Chairs in Old Deer Valley. Here's the Bougie Bubble, the Keatley Chair. And number 1 is really where the Mayflower Tunnel comes out and where the Mayflower Complex was located, so we're right in the thick of things. And then number 2 is where the Star of Utah and the Park Galena, which was the start of what became the Mayflower. And that's, anybody ski the Green Monster? So I'll give the exact directions to just where to see some remnants. So things started, as Kate said, we were a rich mining history starting in 1873 with claims at the Glencoe. And then in 1893, the financial panic, largest disruption of the U.S. economy until the Great Depression, kind of really threw a damper on everything. But the Glencoe, for a while, was producing pretty well. It was shipping significant amount of ore. But then, in 1926 and 27, you had a flurry of corporate consolidation, just aggregating claims, like the Glencoe and the Star of Utah and everything. And this is a common pattern in our mining district. We started with 900 claims this side of Clayton Peak, and that turned into 300 mines. And over 100 years, those 300 mines turned into 3 corporate entities. So, and that's through bankruptcies, lawsuits, mergers and acquisitions, and gunfights underground. It's crazy. And the guy behind a lot of this early consolidation was Charles Moore. He started the Mayflower Tunnel. He had great instincts and bad timing because of the Great Depression. So, you know, just bad luck. William Cranmer comes around a few years later and reorganizes and aggregates even more into the new park. And the new park lasts into the 70s, 1970s. One of their big moments was as they're expanding the Mayflower Tunnel, they hit a really rich bed of ore, and that helped them a lot. And the railroad took notice. In the 20s, they had a rail spur down at the Keeley Tunnel because the Ontario was pumping a lot of ore out that way, made it very efficient to ship from there. And then they extended that down to Mayflower, so that 1 and 2 circles we showed earlier, they extended down to there. And the Mayflower would ship its ore or concentrate down to the valley because Murray, Tooele, Salt Lake all had smelters. This is the old Keeley Railroad Station being transported in the 70s up to Park City to become Park City's senior center. Now they're building a new senior center. I want to find out what they're going to do with that building. So I'll take it.
Does the rail trail work into any of this?
Yes. Yeah. The rail trail was to run a spur line out to Echo to get to the Transcontinental Railroad. So they also had a spur line going really parallel with 224 up to Kimball Junction and then down Parley's. That was a much harder engineering feat, too much elevation and a lot of switchbacks. But they had 2 ways to get to the bigger rail lines. And what we would do to have rail lines today to get to the ski resorts.
You got a train that goes nowhere.
Yeah.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
So I've read a little bit that during this period of time, because so the Hebrew Creek was 1899,
Okay.
and there was some guys with wagons in the way, the Probst and Hicken family. Probst and Hicken's families.
Right.
They were actually, from what I understand, they were transporting ore from the Keeley during that interim period before Union Pacific finished that spur, across the bridge, down, down past Middle Provo to the railroad here.
Okay.
I don't know like how, I only read that one spot, and it's not an official historical account. And I'm curious if there's anybody who knows how much ore those families hauled between, the excavation of the tunnel itself and maybe some actual ore that's some value to it.
Yeah.
Down to the train here.
Yeah.
Have you heard much about that? Or
I have not. I'm not an expert on the railroads and all that, but yes, sir.
So my grandmother worked at the Mountain Light Mine
Yeah.
up here, and they hauled all of it down in ore wagons. I don't know what they did with it when they got down here, but
Loaded on.
she has several accounts of coming down on the ore wagons to go home to Midway.
Gary. Yeah. I've heard some stories about the ore wagons coming down Marzac, that the mine road to Silver Lake, and just losing their brakes and mayhem. But I can't answer your question. It makes, it is of a piece of other stories I've heard closer up to Park City, so it sounds very plausible.
Yeah, there's just this connection here from the Gila Valley to Keeley that,
Yeah.
it's just one of those things.
What I've learned in amateur historical research is absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So Mayflower in the 40s and 50s, they were investing a lot. They got down to the 2,000 foot level in their main shaft, and they were producing in multiple levels, multiple drifts. And but in the 50s, metal prices went down. There were some labor disputes. They came up with a solution, which was an employee-owned miners lease. It was really New Park and the miners cost sharing and profit sharing. It was pretty innovative, and it spread the risk. At about this time, the 50s, we're pretty much down to the Ontario and the Mayflower being the only games in town. Right? And then in the early 60s, Hecla, an Idaho company that had experience doing deep mines in Idaho, they come and strike a lease agreement with New Park. And they get rid of the miners' lease, but that doesn't mean they're harsh to labor. They actually had some very progressive policies, like a no-interest housing loan for their workers. And I think Vail and Altera ought to take a look at that. It might be a pretty good way to solve our affordability crisis. Keith Drosky ran the mine for much of this time. He was a mentor, a friend. Some of my fondest memories were hiking around old mining claims with Keith and his dog Alpha. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he had just a crackling sharp wit. Didn't think much of the EPA, and he's commemorated in Deer Valley's Deep Enough run, because he would after he retired, he would share his knowledge and his research with those, us amateurs, and he would sign off his emails deep enough and well timbered, meaning well timbered as in the mine structures underground. This email's long enough. I've made my argument. It's well designed. Get over it. And Mayflower, Hecla used a lot of, they continued to invest. They got the main shaft down to 2,400 now. By this time, the only shafts in the entire Wasatch Back that are more than 2,000 feet in depth are the Ontario, the Mayflower, and the Daily West. So the Mayflower was one of the biggest mines physically as well as monetarily in the district. And they used lots of technology like this shaft mucker, just to continue drilling and excavating. And they were Carrier Air Conditioning's biggest Utah customer. Because remember we talked about the hot mine? And the temperatures in the Mayflower were harsh, over 100 degrees. And down at the base of the shaft, the water coming into the workings was 149 degrees. So Hecla invested in a 240-ton water chiller they would move the coils, the chilling coils, and the ventilation fans. Okay, they work this wall, that plays out, move it down this tunnel, put it there. So they would cool the working area for the miners. Green Monster. You ski by the bottom of the Mayflower lift, heading towards East Village, and you do a couple of big bends about a quarter mile below Mayflower lift, and you'll see this structure here on the side of the, just off the trail. That was originally part of the Park Galena, but it was also a ventilation fan for the whole Mayflower complex. And in 2013, Amy and I may have gone into that shaft, but we will deny that to anyone.
It was not social media approved.
It was, we did not post it. No, no. So it never happened.
Are there natural hot springs?
Well, here we go.
Okay.
Keith always thought there was a connection between the hot pots and the Mayflower. Couldn't prove it, but he always, his professional opinion was, yeah, absolutely, it's the same connected geology, and geologists will tell you the hotter the area underground, the more likely you're going to have gold there. The silver and the lead tends to go out cooler. So that's why the Mayflower was really our only gold mine. There's a couple that had some significant gold, but the Mayflower was a consistent producer, the 6th largest in the United States in the 60s. And you can see, remember that the little Rubik's cubelet? That's your cubelet. That's probably 3 or 4 cubelets. So the Mayflower was a significant producer of gold. But that didn't stop it from closing down in '72, and all that was left at that point for the last 10 years was the Ontario. And that closed down in '81, '82 time frame. So, sometime in the early '70s, I hope I can pronounce this right, Stichting Mayflower, Dutch company, is that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Okay. They buy the property from New Park, thousands of acres, and in 1976, they approached the Wasatch County Council to say, we want to put in a ski area and 4-season resort and hotels and employee housing and all that right there off the Mayflower exit. This was before Jordanelle has been built. Jordanelle's on the, they're planning for it, but there's no reservoir yet. And I was reading the newspaper accounts, and the reporter got quotes from some of the county officials saying, well, we're a little concerned this is going to bring in a Park City element. Drugs and liberal voters. So that was great. But it took 50 years for that to come about. Well, for the hotel and the ski areas and all that to come about. Extel buys it from Stichting in 2017. They get a plan to remediate the soils, because the Mayflower had at one point a mill and a concentrator on site. So there's some arsenic, cadmium, selenium, and lead in the soils that have to be dealt with. And they get a state-approved plan, and you guys all saw that for 5 years. They're running bulldozers there and building walls and everything, and that was all to clean up the 442 acres. That happens, and they completed it in 2024, got approved in 2025, and then it was Katie, bar the door. Construction cranes are coming. So, and this was the 2nd largest soil remediation project in all of Utah. The biggest being down in Moab, the uranium tailings down there. So that brings us up to speed on the Mayflower. I do want to have a couple of hikers. They've been on the guided hikes, the history hikes. Amy is also a guide on those hikes. DJ will probably become a guide on those hikes, right?
Maybe.
Did you get an offer letter? So we have June, once a month, June through September, we hike around Deer Valley to some of the old mining areas and tell stories. So hope you'll join us on that. It's $10, which goes to nonprofits in the area, and but it's fun time. Questions, comments, stories? Yes, sir.
When in June is that?
June 21st, July 19th, August 16th, September 20th. It's on the Deer Valley website. Summer activities. Fun time. Yes, sir.
Question about the vertical mines. With that amount of depth, how straight were they? Like, were they perfectly vertical?
Pretty much. I mean, they had to run an elevator shaft. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes they would have up to a 4-cage meaning elevator car, 4-cage operation. So yeah, they were up and down.
So to get to the drifts,
Yeah.
were there just elevator stops? So
Yep. And they would have a bell system, you know, I don't know the exact, but think Morse code. And the operator at the top would go, oh, okay, 900 foot level, and he'd go, 1 potato, 2 potatoes, you know, boom, you know. So it's probably a little more complicated than that. But that's the general idea. Yes, ma'am?
With all that drilling, those huge tunnels, what's supporting all those hotels and stuff? They're building right on top.
Oh, it's hard rock. You know, it's not they're not in danger of collapse now. Well, I should say there have been a few subsidences. That's gentler than collapse.
So in 5 years, we don't hear about settling the foundations?
Yeah, there might be a little bit. Hey, well, you know, you put your money down.
That's a
You
lot
take
of
your
weight,
chance.
you
Yeah.
know, on
Well,
all that.
aren't you confident that our real estate industry will disclose any risks?
Right.
But no, I mean, there's a lot
I mean, I'm
of
sure there's
there's a
lots of
lot of
studies.
really solid rock, and you know, I don't think anyone's life is in danger.
No.
Maybe their basement cracks and they got to rebuild it or something. Yeah. Yes.
So when you go up the Mirror Lake Highway, I see the signs for Duchesne Tunnel. Was that also a mining drainage?
I don't think so. I think that's an irrigation tunnel
Oh,
It's water, bringing water from.
from the Duchesne over to this watershed. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, sir. Anything else? Okay. One last slide, which is
I have a question.
yeah.
So when they were building Montage, and then every time they're building something in the old town, they'll like find a non-exploded
Oh,
bomb.
right.
So I was just curious,
Yeah, he talks about
has
those
anyone,
hikes, I think.
yeah, has
There's
anyone
a
heard
great
of,
story about that in
Oh,
this book.
has that happened over in Deer Valley East
So-
so far?
So I talked to Dave Layton of Layton Construction, and so I can't vouch to how accurate this is, but it's a great story, and I'll tell it. They're building the Montage 14, 15 years ago. Backhoe operator is digging out what's going to become the underground garage. And in 1902, at the 1,200-foot level of the Daily West, the powder monkey, the guy who managed the powder room where they stored the explosives, drops his candle, big explosion, kills 34 miners. 2 things come out of it. Biggest tragedy in Park City history, at least until the advent of the epic and icon passes. I can't say that when I'm wearing this, I'm sorry. Retract it. Okay, turn off the camera. But two things came out of that. One was the Park City Miners Hospital. They wanted emergency care closer than Salt Lake. The other thing was a law. State passes, you can only store 1 day's worth of dynamite underground from then on. Everything else has to be in an above-ground bunker. You can still see one of these bunkers near the old Judge Tunnel. That's what the backhoe operator uncovered, was that bunker. 3 cases of 80-year-old dynamite. And Dave Layton says, yeah, so the foreman calls the Park City cops. The Park City cops say, why don't you call the fire department? The fire department says, here's the number for the Salt Lake City Bomb Squad. Salt Lake City Bomb Squad says, you know, there's this company that works with mines, and for only $1,000 an hour, they'll come and find and neutralize the rest of that old dangerous dynamite. So Layton Construction takes a 10-day delay on the montage, and the company finds, I think, 17 more cases and neutralizes them. So the upshot was the montage missed the first Thanksgiving week, but they were open by Christmas. They're doing fine. But a couple of years later, I'm leading a history hike for a corporate group. It's a bunch of mergers and acquisition lawyers out in New York. And I take them by, fun group. I take them by the old Daily West and tell them that story. And the head honcho pulls me aside and says, Mike, that was a pretty good story, but I don't want you to think that $1,000 an hour is excessive. So you can read that and other stories in Attitude at Altitude. And if you want to order it actually there'll be a copy here at the library. And if you want to order it from Folklore, just give them a call, they'll order it for you, or it's on hand in these places, or I have a few copies tonight if anyone's interested.
Can you get it on Amazon?
You can get it on Amazon, but Jeff doesn't need our money. Right? He's doing just fine. Buy local. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Very much.
Coming, and please join us next month for early settlers of the Heber Valley, and then we will be posting this lecture on our website in a couple of weeks, probably like a week. We just have to edit it Thank you so much again.
Good job.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.